Archers, welcome back to the video version of our podcast. Today, we're talking about Toy Story 1, and we have the penultimate Toy Story fan, Jake B.
Wow.
Who's going to be joining us. Dude, you got the Pizza Planet shirt. Like,
Yes.
you came ready
I had to
throw
bust
down.
out the old Pizza Planet shirt.
What era is that from? Like, when did you buy that shirt?
I think high school. We had like a family trip to Disney World. I think my aunt got it for me. I was probably a sophomore in high school, so
Nice.
years ago, and it still fits. So I guess that's good.
I'm very jealous. I don't know.
I love it.
That's great. Dope. So today we're talking about Toy Story 1. So we're not going to be covering the whole series. We're just kind of diving into the themes and characters of the first film, primarily, which are Buzz and Woody. So we'll just kind of jump into it. So
Sweet.
The thing that stuck out to me, like literally right as we sat down to record, is you said you had never seen this movie the same way that you had seen it this time. So I want to pick your brain a little bit before we get into the questions, because it's kind of like parable arrows. I always joke and call it like this thing, whatever this thing is.
Yeah.
That's kind of what we're out to do, is argue that we can take anything that is story based and we can somehow see it from a deeper perspective that isn't just to be like academic analysis where it's like, oh, I know why characters did certain things, but I know why they did that, and now I'm able to look at my life, the lives of my friends and family and people I see on the street or in the news or whatever, and either empathize, see them from a different lens, see them from a way where I want to fix or change or help, or just like it just helps me understand. So help us see. So what about this process, or how did you approach watching this movie this time? A movie that you've probably seen. How many times would you say you've seen the first one?
I don't even, because I watched it so much as a kid, but probably at least 15, 20.
Yikes.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
So
and on in the background too. So yeah.
Okay. So of those 15 times, this one, where would you rank this time that you watched it? Like what about this experience was different?
I mean, it's different watching it as a kid than as an adult. Like, as a kid, it's just kind of like, a magical world of these toys coming to life. As an adult now, like with these, framing with these questions, I'm watching it and it's like, man, this is like way deeper than I thought. These characters have like such, emotion, and I can relate to them in so many ways, kind of like you mentioned, new perspectives. So this is like, I loved watching it just like, recently. And I think that it gives me a whole different perspective on the movie. I loved it. Maybe not my favorite, because as a kid, but it was really cool experience.
Awesome. Dope. Well, the first question that when we, my friend Femi and I had this first discussion, and this is kind of like to demonstrate what it looks like to have this conversation, and that our discussion will probably be very different from that hour-long version that we had. So the first question that we talked about is, in the story, there's this very clear setup between all the toys that they're almost clans and tribes versus like a business or a family or characters in a group. Like there's these very weird dynamics where they're not really quite friends, but they're not quite enemies. Like everyone's kind of wary of each other. So this time around, what did you think was maybe a takeaway or a significance that the toys are not acting like a family? And what would you maybe argue is what you would hope would be a healthier version of that? Or like, what would you say? Just how does that look?
So I kind of noticed how you said it's not like a family or business. It's almost, I almost thought it was almost like a competition, or like, like you put contestants on a show like Survivor or something. Because like, I never really realized how these toys are all like super concerned every time there's a birthday or Christmas. And then like, I realized that, the theme of all of them is like, they just want to keep their identity in their place. And it's almost like the fear of losing out, or that greed and jealousy of each other. And so it's a really interesting dynamic. It's not like a family or business, even though like Woody's like the sheriff, and they kind of listen to him and have meetings and whatever. But it was just like fascinating to see how that's like their whole life is being played with as a toy, and they're, that comes at risk. Like every time a new toy comes into play, like Buzz did. So that was fascinating to me to see how that dynamic kind of worked, and how that was such a huge theme that I had never noticed before.
Yeah. That phrasing is interesting, and I like it, that they're kind of contestants, or it almost is like almost, I don't know if this is accurate because neither of us has kids, but both married, don't have kids, but they almost seem like siblings or something, where it's almost like there's a new kid coming in and they're like, oh my gosh, they're going to take attention away from me, because their whole thing is, well, I'm a toy, and toys are supposed to be played with and go on adventures and be part of a kid's imagination. Yep. And if there's a new shinier toy that comes in, well, who am I now? Like, what happens to me? So to dive maybe deeper into that, so what about that resonated with you? Or like, was that just like an observation? Was there any part of you that you were like, man, like I've either seen people in my life who've had that experience? Did you feel like you resonated with that and just that sense or situation?
Yeah, I found myself like identifying with several characters like so much throughout the movie, and I feel like with Woody, it was like, I used to be very, I loved like my friends and what I had with them, but anytime I wasn't included or I wasn't invited to something, I felt so left out, and I struggled with that a lot when I was younger. And like, when like Buzz comes in and Woody starts to, obviously it's clear his jealousy and his anger towards Buzz, even though he doesn't really know him. I definitely could resonate with that. Like the feeling of being replaced and being, valued less than I was, and not getting that affirmation from those I love or whatever. So lots of stuff like that. That was really interesting and hard hitting. I was like, man, I never felt this guilt as a 8-year-old watching this movie. Yeah, now I do. So. Yeah,
almost like the clarity, right? Like looking back.
Yeah.
So you mentioned or said specifically that when you were younger, it was kind of that feeling of being left out was really hard.
Yeah.
Does that still come up? Do you feel like you've grown through it? How did you grow through it? Was there anything from the film that kind of you felt like you resonated with on the other end of it, where I know one of our later questions, we kind of talk about Woody and Buzz reconciling, and part of that reconciliation is they don't see each other as a threat anymore. What was it like for you to go through that process to see or notice as a kid or as a young adult, like, man, it sucks when people don't ask me to go to the movies with them, and like, how did you face that?
Yeah, I think, I was blessed with great friends in like middle school, high school. But like anytime that I would see something like that I wasn't a part of, or even them, favoring each other or whatever, it was hard. And so I think my parents were really, wise in saying like, hey, like nobody is going to be invited to everything, or nobody is going to be loved by everybody. And so like that's going to happen. And it's a good thing that those people are friends with each other and that they find value in each other. It doesn't always have to be you. Right. And, I learned that slowly through, I'd say like high school, and really like, I feel like I've grown well out of that. And I don't think I really struggle with that now. I love hearing about when, my friends are doing stuff with each other, because I love that they're finding that joy, and I know that I still have a great relationship with them. So regardless of what they do with other people. So that was something that's, just like a self-identity thing, and it came out of like jealousy and greed and whatnot, but something that I was able to grow through.
Yeah.
And seeing that, kind of similar situations in the movie was interesting too. I was like, man, this is like my whole childhood to adulthood, like wrapped up in one big story. It's crazy.
Yeah. I think you kind of connected some gears for me, because something you said, I've been thinking, I was just talking to Gloria, my wife, by the way, who we've just been like processing through life, and, kind of almost facing things like that about like, okay, what about growing up kind of stuck with us, and what are maybe some things that we don't struggle with anymore in terms of how we feel in different relational dynamics. And something that I was thinking through is struggling that I have a huge challenge with uncertainty, and I mean that's everybody, but that hits me especially hard, and a component of it is I don't want to do anything unless there's a for sure like result, or I can logic through every step of the process to be like, okay, like I can see enough through the decisions that I'm willing to like take a step forward, which is almost antithetical to the gospel, right, of like living by faith.
Yeah.
And I was listening to a podcast where there was a pastor talking about how he was praying for his dad to come to faith and all this stuff. And he was like, he lives in Portland and he has a church in Portland. And he was like, I have all the faith in the world that God is going to redeem and restore and heal Portland. I have no faith for my dad. And just like that component of it. And then he shared, though, that it was actually through his daughter that was actually one of the moments that softened his heart, who his dad actually did eventually come to faith before he died recently. And I think that was really powerful to me to think through. I have no idea what decision is going to lead to something beautiful, that it's not necessarily going to be bad. Like I think we're trained to see things like really negatively all the time. So I think of the story and I think of Buzz and Woody, and Woody, instead of Buzz coming in, Buzz being this new toy, Buzz being potentially someone to offer a new perspective, to be a good friend, who they do become really good friends. He's a threat, and he's someone to be afraid of, and he's someone who's going to steal his place. And so he just brings out all this jealousy and, like you've said, anger from Woody.